Good morning. My name is Larry Minix. I'm the president of Leading Age, and I'm privileged to be the chair of Generations United. We welcome you to this second annual centerpiece event around what we believe is one of the key policy issues affecting children and seniors in this country. You have a packet of information on Generations United, but our mission is to improve the lives of children, youth, and older people through intergenerational collaboration, through public policy, and programs that endure for the benefit of all ages. Today, we're going to be talking about Family Matters, multi-generational families in a volatile economy. This report sheds important light on the plight of millions of Americans who are struggling financially and coming together in an effort to survive tough economic times. Much of the talk in Congress and elsewhere revolves around cutting programs and services. We intend to make a strong argument for policymakers to closely examine other options and, in fact, strengthen the many safety net programs. To not do so is simply unethical and false economy. Americans are doing everything that they can to stay afloat, including moving in with family. Leaders across all sectors need to get together on these issues because we're all in this together. We cannot let ourselves be fragmented, chipped away, and lose the health of families that many of us have spent so long trying to develop. Now, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce Donna Butts. She is Generations United's CEO. She's going to review key findings. I would suggest to you that there is no one in this country or around the world that knows more about these issues than Donna Butts. And we are privileged that she is our CEO, and this country is honored to have Donna as one of the experts in the world on these issues. Donna Butts.
Thank you, Larry. I really appreciate your welcoming remarks. And welcome, everybody. Good morning. Okay. Good morning. Good morning. I don't know about you, but it always takes me a while to get warmed up, especially I understand that it's rainy and not really pleasant outside. So in particular, we appreciate your making the effort to be with us today. We are very excited about the opportunity to release our second signature report, share it with you, and start to get the word out about the important work that's underway in families and the important role that families play in supporting each other. So today what we're going to talk about is Family Matters, and in tough economic times, we matter even more to each other. Today, more than 51.4 million Americans of all ages, or about 1 in 6, live in multi-generational households. That's more than a 10% increase since the start of the Great Recession in 2007. Some multi-generational households choose to live together. Others do it because of the widespread impact of the nation's economic downturn and uncertain recovery. Generations United recently commissioned a nationwide survey of Americans living in multi-generational households, which we define as one that contains 3 or more parent-child generations. So one that contains 3 or more generations. The results are included in our new report, which is Family Matters, Multi-Generational Families in a Volatile Economy. And I believe everybody got a copy of this as well as the executive summary when you came in. The results that we include in this report come directly from the families themselves. 66% reported that the current economic climate was a factor in their coming together. 40% reported that job loss, change in job status, or underemployment was a reason that their family formed. 20% reported that health care costs prompted them to form their multi-generational household. And 14% said that foreclosure or housing loss was a precipitating factor that brought them together. Now, the poll also showed that the arrangements helped the families, and they helped the families in a number of ways. 75% agreed that it made it easier for them to provide for the care of one or more family members, easier to provide that care. 72% agreed that multi-generational household arrangement improved the financial situation of at least one of the family members. And 52% said it made it possible for a family member to continue in school or enroll in a job training program. The arrangement also has unique effects on family relationships. 82% agreed that the family's multi-generational household arrangement had enhanced the bonds among family members, that it had increased those bonds. And yet, it isn't all roses. 78% agreed that at times the family's multi-generational arrangement contributed to the stress among the family members. So it can also be very stressful. We also found that government programs play a key role in helping support those families. 63% agreed that Social Security plays a vital role in the financial stability of a multi-generational household. Now, that really reinforces what we at Generations United talk about often, which is that Social Security pays more in benefits to children than any other federal program. That, in fact, 6.5 million children in this country live in a household that receive part of their family income from Social Security. So it's not that it's a retirement program only. It's a family support program. And today we're going to hear from Adrienne Charanak, who'll tell us shortly about what it's meant to her family to have Social Security as a part of their income. But at the end of the report, what 82% of the families agreed with is that there needs to be more government supports, more government programs that are supportive of multi-generational households like the ones that they live in. The report focuses primarily on how policymakers can help families achieve a more secure financial footing and includes recommendations on things such as addressing barriers to creating affordable housing for multi-generational families, improving support to family caregivers, and protecting and strengthening Social Security and the Affordable Care Act. We also discussed the important role that faith-based and community organizations can play in assisting these families by setting up support groups, offering formal and informal respite arrangements, offering services to multiple generations at the same site, such as co-locating child care with adult daycare, so that the middle generation only has to make one drop instead of 2 or 3 or 4. But it really makes sense while saving dollars to house that kind of service in the same facility. The report also makes some recommendations for how employers can help, such as improving family leave policies, extending health coverage to other members of the family, and expanding employee assistance programs. Now, I don't know if anybody remembers, but in 1948, the United Nations declared the family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society and is entitled to protection by society and the state. Multi-generational households have been a part of the American fabric since our country was founded. As families face a volatile economy, increasing financial pressures, and changing demographics, it's clear multi-generational households are here to stay, making it even more critical that society and the state provide the protection they deserve. Acting today to address the challenges facing multi-generational households will pay dividends tomorrow. Generations United offers this report in that spirit as a modest investment in America's future. Because the bottom line is that just as with multi-generational families, we're all in this together, and family matters. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to working with all of you as we pursue the report's recommendations. Now, I'm really delighted, because one of the things I love about these events is we get to have some provocative discussion led by a provocateur moderator. And I'm just delighted today to introduce a dear, dear friend and colleague of Generations United and a longtime friend of mine, one of the first people I met when I moved to Washington, D.C., who is an Emmy-winning journalist, Darren Gersh, who heads up the PBS Nightly Business Report. So, Darren.
Thank you. I'm sure you all join me in wondering where Donna's hat is. So, in the course of my reporting of the economy and things like that, I've done it for many years. And when I read this report, two things kind of jumped out at me. One is that I've spent a lot of time thinking about how volatile our economy is. That's one of our strengths, is that we have a volatile economy. It churns a lot, it creates things, but it destroys a lot of things, which leads to the second thing that jumped out when I read this report, which is security, and how families really and people really desperately want security and economic security in a vibrant economy. So they want a balance, and that's what this report is all about. Family Matters, Multi-Generational Families in a Volatile Economy, illustrates how families are coming together, but also they're forced to come together because of the economy. And I think that that's a theme for our ages, really, and a theme that we're going to see over the next couple decades. Donna covered the report very well. I mean, it highlights how families are sharing resources. It emphasized the needs to strengthen policies. I want to go straight to one of the most important things, though, I think we're going to hear today, which is from the people who are actually living this issue. So, Adrienne Charniak, do you want to come on up? Adrienne is just a tremendous person. I got to hear her speak just before we all came out. Adrienne is joining us from Riverside, Illinois, along with her grandson, Joey, who is now, I think, a veteran of these things. Adrienne is a passionate advocate for grandfamilies, grandparents, and other relatives raising children, a wonderful human being, and she's here to share her story with us. So, thank you.
I have to push this down. Ben is about as tall as my husband is, so I can't pat him on the head. First of all, I want to tell you what a wonderful experience it is to be a multi-generational family. My mother, who is 90, lives with us. My husband and I are both 71, and our grandson is 13. But we also care for my mother-in-law, who is 89 and has been fighting ovarian cancer for the last 20 years, and who insisted that when I come to Washington, I needed my nails done. So, that being said, and my mother always said, stand straight. So, I'm standing straight. We became a multi-generational family household when my father passed away 13 years ago. And I made a promise to him that I would keep care of my mother, and that was his biggest concern before his passing. My mom lived alone in a very bad neighborhood on the west side of Chicago. And after her garage being burnt down and the gangs breaking into her home, my husband, Ron, said, now mind you, Ron invited her, said, come and live with us. I will feel safer if you're with us. And then Joey, our grandson, has been with us for 12 years. Joey is truly our gift, as is my mother. And neither of Joey's parents were able to really care for him properly, and we didn't want to see him to go into foster care. So we pulled up our suspenders and went to court. I made every court appearance. As of October the 27th of this year, I have been to court 127 times. It has cost us over $100,000 in legal fees to keep my grandson with us. I once had a pension. My pension has been exhausted because of legal fees and for paying for my son's medical cares. We have never been a family to ask anyone for anything, but all I ever asked for anyone was give me a phone number as to who I can talk to. Joey calls me Bubby, which is Czechoslovakian for grandma. And he calls my mother Double Bubby, as does all his teachers. And the other day he got up very early and he came up and told me, he says, Bubby, you're going to have a real good day today. I made you the coffee, I fed the dog, I fed the cat, and your paper is on the table. And I did have a good day, just knowing that somebody loved me that much to do that for me. Right now, he's getting mostly all A's in school, which I'm very proud of. We have had our share of challenges. Mom has had 3 heart surgeries, 7 cancer surgeries. Ron is one heck of a great man. He has had a stroke and 3 major back surgeries. Joey was born with difficulties. He was in the hospital for 5 days after his birth. And I sang and I rocked him and I talked to him. And for a while there, one nurse thought I was his mother. It was really a miracle. Joey still is currently on medications, has come a long, long way from day one. So there have been times when we have had 3 or 4 doctor's appointments in 1 week, and I would get everything all confused. Well, now I have one big book, and everything goes into that large book. And if it's not in there, don't count on me to get you where you belong. About 6 years ago, we started a grandparent support group, and I call it the Gift of Hope. It's named after the organ donor program that my son was active in. Joey's dad passed away 2 years ago. He was an organ donor. He had helped 25 people. And one day I was talking to my other grandmother and saying what a gift our grandchildren were. And she said, Adrian, do you realize we are the hope, just like the Gift of Hope? And so our name has been changed. Last year alone, we have helped 178 families. Now, that might not be a lot to you, but to me, it's an awful lot, especially when they're calling my house all hours of the night and day, and my mother is giving them recipes or telling them what to do with the children, or my husband is telling them, well, I'm taking the dog out right now, but Adrian will call you back. But people come to our meetings from all over the western suburb area and from Chicago. They come from as far as Wisconsin border. We find what they need. We collect shoes and clothing and beds and school supplies, and you don't want to see my garage. I try to help in any way that I can. And then they form friendships, and it's people helping people, whether it's going to a graduation with a grandmother who has no spouse to go with her, or taking somebody to the doctor. Right now I have a grandmother that has an inoperable brain tumor, and I have a grandson that's in the hospital with cancer. And our group has all come and stood by their sides. I am so proud of these children in our group. They have made the honor roll. Some have been offered college scholarships because they're straight A students. And 2 girls in our group run essays. One grandmother travels 4 buses through the city of Chicago to come to our meetings. Her grandson is a star. He's on gymnastics, basketball, and football, and I truly believe she is the reason. But we also need policies that would help us. We need more housing for our grandparents, not just for the low-income families. I deal mostly with middle-income families where there is one paycheck coming in. We have grandparents in our group that have taken out mortgages for the and refinanced their homes so that they can keep their grandchildren with them, and they are paying the legal fees out of their mortgage payments. They're refinancing. Some of them have adopted their children because they have taken out a mortgage on their home to pay the legal fees. Now their homes are in foreclosure. People may think that someone living on Social Security isn't poor, but if you're getting $1,200 a month, and many households aren't even getting that much, you can't afford to spend $1,000 on housing. Lawmakers need to think about the health care. Grandkids often have medical needs. I am just grateful that here in Illinois, we have the All Kids Plan. It's a health program for children. It makes things like doctor visits affordable, and grandparents in our group don't abuse it because we know it's there if we need it. I did not know about this when we first got Joey, so we are paying all his medical bills. It was one day that I saw a $3,000 bill from a hospital, and on the way to work, I saw All Kids. Politicians need to think about how much grandparents are saving the government. And all these kids went into foster care with a foster parent being paid $600 to $800 a month. Well, I recall a speaker at the Grand Rally who said we are saving the government $6.5 billion. We have had friends who have retired who are always telling us about their next cruise to Hawaii or wherever. I tell them I cruise every day to school and to doctor's appointments, skateboard parks. And Joey really is my cruise. And Joe, we cruise to Washington, D.C. I wouldn't have my cruises any other way but with my grandson, Joey. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to get our, we're running a little late, so why don't we get the panelists up here and we'll get mic'd up. Joey and Adrian, thank you for coming, and Adrian, thank you for that powerful story. People like you are the glue that hold our communities and society together. And I can just say the report talks about and demonstrates how many families like these there are. I can tell you as a reporter, I've gone all over the country and heard many, many families share similar kinds of stories about what grand families and intergenerational families do to keep it together, to keep our society together. So let me introduce our esteemed panel. It says here, right here, we're all esteemed, so we're looking forward to insightful discussions. And we're going to talk about the Family Matters report. I'm going to briefly introduce them because you can find out more about them in your packet. And I think you'll get a sense of where they're coming from their titles. Lisa Mensah is the Executive Director of the Economic Policy Project for the Aspen Institute. And Lynn Fries-Feinberg is the Senior Strategic Policy Advisor for AARP's Public Policy Institute. Letitia Miranda is the Associate Director for the National Council of La Raza's Economic Policy Project. So we're going to dive right into it so we can have more time to chat. And I guess I'm a TV guy, so I should know how to put this on myself, although I've never quite... No, I got it, man. I had mastered it. See, the tech people never trust the people in front of the camera to get it right. Let's just start off. Each of you has a different perspective on multi-generational families. And I wanted to start with Lynn because I think you have a story to tell. Why are you interested in... Why are multi-generational households of interest to you, and especially the trend of them growing?
Well, this report, the Generations United report, really resonated with me for two reasons, one personal, one professional. And personally, it made me think back that I grew up when I was a young girl in a multi-generational household where I lived with my mother and my grandparents, and formed a very strong bond with my grandparents that resulted in my choosing for my professional career to work in the field of aging. So it was a very positive experience for me. And professionally, I think the Generations United report is particularly important because it shines a light on the need to better recognize and support families in their caregiving role.
Letitia, in the report it talks about how for Hispanic families, multi-generational households are more the norm and more important. Is that why this issue is so important to you?
Well, I agree that multi-generational households have always been more common in the Hispanic community, and so that is interesting to me. And also just the growth in the Hispanic population within the United States means that more of these kind of characteristics of our families will start to reveal themselves more in the overall data. So, we're pushing our community as well as the Asian community, who is also growing a lot. These ethnic groups are part of this trend.
Lisa, you study economic security policy, basically. When you hear about the rise of multi-generational families, what do you think of from that perspective?
I think about your opening comment about fragility and volatility. And I love the way this report positions family, and I didn't know that in 1945 we had recognized family as the central unit. I love the way the report positions family as this anchor amidst fragility and volatility. And what I love the way Generations United has done is we can all be thankful for families, but you have pushed to say both the personal and voluntary things that family are doing, and also the public policy role that we play, either voluntarily or with our tax dollars. And I think that hits right into the economic issues.
Well, you're all mentioning some of the same things. We've kind of always had this. We've got more of it now. Should we celebrate this? Should we be panicking that people no longer have a ranch house in the suburbs? Or actually, they're no longer ranch houses. I guess they're dating myself. Should have a detached single-family home in the suburbs where they live alone and they drive 6 hours to grandma's house. Do you want to jump in, Lynn? Do you think?
Well, I think it's both. Families have always been the most important support for older adults, regardless of whether you live together, you live near each other, or you live far away. But it also means, from the data from this Generations United report, that families who are caring particularly for older adults with multiple chronic conditions, who may have cognitive impairments and functional impairments, it takes a particular toll when you're living together in the same home. A physical toll, a financial toll, and an emotional toll, and families need support, greater support.
I think there's partly an assumption out there that this is what families are supposed to do: take care of each other, come together in time of need. And so when you go to a policymaker and you say, well, you need to support these families, why should the government step into what has been working in some ways very well, and is also something that civil society and people do well on their own? I think there's a presumption that that's sort of what families do. Does anybody want to jump in? How do you make that case?
First of all, I think what the report makes clear is they're not jumping in. They're already in. And I love the fact that we're calling in many of the recommendations here to do what we already do. So if we already have a social insurance system, if we already have a social security system which has provided this vital support, and it was hard won, but it's 70 years old, this report is saying do it more, sustain it, prove that it's working well. So I do think we set up a slightly false dichotomy when we act as if this is additional burden on government. Many of the things that are called for is to do what we already see is working, and we've already made victories, for instance, Affordable Care Act, and implement them or strengthen them. And that I like. So in some ways, we aren't asking a lot of new things. I have a lot of new asks, but I think in many ways this is asking for us to do what we've already done, already blessed, already put in law, and do it better.
I'm just curious, if you go talk to lawmakers and policymakers, what reaction do you get when you bring up these issues?
Well, what I would say, I actually don't lobby on this issue, but I do think you want to support families doing the right thing, and it's typically cheaper for the person to be cared for within the home. So whatever you can do to facilitate that and make that that home-based situation more viable and for the longer term, that's always going to be cheaper than institutionalizing older people or institutionalizing children and taking them away. Besides that, that would hurt them emotionally and so on. You want to be able to support that, I think, through public policy.
Cheaper is usually better, except there are a lot of people who lobby for more expensive, especially where Medicare is concerned. Is this a way to make these policies more attractive in the current environment by emphasizing that you're enabling people to have better and cheaper solutions?
Well, it's true. It does cost less to be cared for in your home, to have a family helping you take your medicine or whatever it is. So why not note that?
And I think, Darren, the thing that, to my mind, although I also don't lobby on these issues, but I think the country is watching a new cohort of aging. The huge successes in medical care mean we can live longer. I love Adrian's story that she still has her mother with her. That's a phenomenal gift. And that wasn't true so many generations, and it's not true of so much of the world. And I think most of us in the policy arena are watching our largest cohort now, the baby boom cohort, begin to age. The first year claim Social Security this year. And I think that conversation, which has a long tail to it, I'm not giving anything away. I'm 61 with the president, 1961, born in 1961. And so we're the tail of the boom. And, we've got 17 years before we can claim Social Security. So I think a lot of the discussion now is what are we preparing for? There's going to be, it's like that picture of the snake that eats something. There's going to be a big group of us going through. And so not only should we be looking for things that are cost efficient, but that is our society. We are a society that will age and that will have these fascinating dynamics of intergenerational connections. And so, like it or not, it's coming. And I think that begins to be a good place to start with our policymakers.
Well, Larry mentioned at the beginning that, with the failure of the super committee and the failure of all these efforts to come up with a substantial reduction in our long-term terrible budget outlook, that there's a temptation to start picking people apart and pitting people against each other. How do you frame a debate where that doesn't happen, where we can keep thinking about how we're all in this together, as opposed to, I'm going to protect what's mine? Any thoughts on that, Lynn?
We have to, in my belief, start thinking about quality of life and quality of care issues and not just reducing costs so that families can survive and thrive in the United States. The AARP Public Policy Institute has estimated the economic value of caring for an adult with chronic health conditions is estimated at $450 billion a year. That's more than we pay for Medicaid in the United States. So what would happen if families like yourself decided, well, no, I won't be caring for my mother anymore, and went on strike for a day? There are enormous consequences, but in order for families to continue to thrive and provide the major supports for their family members and friends, they also need support, and we need to be able to think about what are better and more meaningful supports for families.
Following up on that, so I think it's 63% of the multi-generational households surveyed in this report agree that Social Security is vital to their financial stability. So what can be done to strengthen Social Security and provide help for these folks, but at the same time understand that it's got a long-run imbalance?
So many of us work on the Social Security issue, and to solve the long-term solvency shortfall is not that difficult. So if, for example, if we paid 1% more in our payroll tax, that will solve the long-term 75-year shortfall. And if we did other little changes to the program, again, really, really small revenue enhancements, we could be able to increase certain benefits. For example, the multi-generational, this report talks about extending benefits for students until they finish college, which when I graduated from high school, I received Social Security benefits because my father passed away when I was little. I was the last year that got those benefits for college, but it was incredibly helpful. I remember it paid for my rent, and I was able to graduate from school and everything. And it would have been a lot harder. I could have probably still have done it with financial aid, but it would have been a lot harder without that support.
Do you think that Congress would be open to that? Do you actually think that you could?
These things don't cost very much. Some of those, like this one, that student benefit is not very expensive. These are not break the bankers, As I say, if people act like we can never pay any more for the program, then, of course they're just going to want to cut everything. But to enhance revenue is not, it's not enormous, the cost that we're talking about.
Well, I'm sorry, do you want to follow?
I love this point of Letitia's, because what she's basically saying is we don't have to cut to get the situation where we thrive and where this program goes in full solvency. And I think there's been such disinformation. First of all, the program does not contribute to the deficit and does not have a short-run problem. It has a long-run 75-year modest problem that can be solved without cutting. So I like the first thing is we don't have to cut. We can have what we want by modest tweaks to the revenue side. And they do, and most people say they would pay more for this program. I'd like to see Congress have a special Social Security Commission, as we have done before, to deal with the long-term problem. And then on the shorter-term needs for the whole government, we need to honestly put revenues back into the equation. And I think that's what it'll take to get many of the things paid for that this report calls for.
Well, what kind of policies do you think would actually help people like Adrian and Joey? They're right here. So what kind of policies would help them, but also that would have a chance in the current environment? Because I understand what you're saying, but from my reporting and talking to people on the Hill, it really is a very tight revenue scene, and they're down. The feeling is if we do something for this, there won't be money for that. And it really is becoming a situation where things are being picked apart. So any thoughts on the specific policy recommendations that would strengthen this report or that you would like to see actually happen? Lynn, you want to start?
I would just say I think that there are a range of recommendations in the Generations United report that are very important for us to consider as a country. One is the refundable caregiver tax credit. That is a very important idea that would give some financial relief to caregiving families. We know that about over 40% of family caregivers of older adults spend more than $5,000 a year out of pocket. Well, those costs are only going to increase as the economy does not get better. And a refundable caregiver tax credit would make an enormous difference in keeping families together in the home and in the multi-generational home. Also, programs like respite care, which is also another recommendation.
What exactly does that mean? Because I saw it and I wanted to understand what it meant.
Sure. Respite care is a concept of giving people a break. When you think about caring for somebody who has Alzheimer's disease, for example, there are enormous burdens and strains in managing that person's behavior. To improve quality of life and quality of care, sometimes you need to have a break, to have somebody come into the home to help you out, or to go to an adult day center, also for socialization for that older person. So respite care is to give someone a break, and we need to bolster those programs in public policy as well as in the private sector. And we also need workplace policies. We need to expand the definition of family under the Family and Medical Leave Act that was signed into law by President Clinton in 1993. And we need to have paid family leave. Many families today can't afford to take unpaid leave and time away from their job, and we really need to have paid family leave in the United States.
I wanted to get back to that, but one thing I was struck reading this report and hearing other stories is what happened to the middle generation? It seems like we have more solid grandparents, but somehow the middle generation didn't fare as well in forming families and keeping their family connections together and living up to their responsibilities. What happened there, and how do you is there anything that we can do to help the middle generation, the parents, be more successful family units?
I mean, I think some of that is a reflection of like long-term economic income inequality, and for example, with male earnings for men with only a high school degree or less, the dramatic drop in their earning potential from 1970 to the present. It used to be a long time ago that you didn't need a very advanced education in order to own a home and have a stable job, but that's a lot harder to do now, and I think we need to continue to support adult education and programs that can help people retrain for this economy that we're in, and the loss of all those good types of jobs that have gone away and gone to other countries and so on.
Do we want to actually support the marriages themselves?
How do you do that?
Maybe make that. I've seen some things where if you make it slightly a little more difficult to get divorced, or before people get divorced, they go through counseling. That sometimes those things work. I'm just wondering if anybody's thought about that.
I'm not an expert. I don't know.
No. Okay, last question, which is, so I work in a business program, and what I've seen is that the private sector in this country is incredibly dynamic, often very efficient. It's got its problems, but it can get a lot of things done. Can the private sector be a big help here?
I think I would, can I hop in?
Yeah.
So I liked that the report actually made some specific recommendations. In private sector, you're using quite generally.
Right.
There is our bigger employers, our bigger corporate sector that's always often taken a lead. And then there's a private sector that's quite vast, that are smaller businesses, informal employment. And I think maybe the report speaks particularly to the first group, companies that employ folks. And I thought that there was, we have a great tradition of diversity and volunteerism in those sectors. So I thought they gave great ways to get started. From everything from allowing employees to get on your insurance policy, that would make a huge difference in my family. I can get everybody paid for it. I live with my mom, And here's my mom. Her teeth are the ones that need the most help. And, she's 75, and I cannot, I've had dental insurance since I started working, and it's never been available to my mom, who's my dependent now. So I thought it was great that you gave ways for companies to start. Those will be hard, but for some companies, that'll be a great breakthrough. So I like that the report allowed us to say voluntarily what we could do at the firm level. But mostly, our companies are also actors in our political debate, and they are the first people we turn to, we as workers, who get stretched when we're taking care of kids and parents. And so I hope next year you do have a company up here that's willing to also say their acknowledgement of how today's worker is feeling the stretch and how they're supporting the stretch, because I do think there's been some innovations there. Okay.
Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Thank you to our panelists. We're going to have now a little more personal testimony. Joe, we're going to hear from Joey. Because I think, look, if we're going to be a successful a successful country, I hear a lot of lip service about how the next generation is going to need to move us forward. But it's not just the next generation, it's people like Joey. And if we don't invest in kids like Joey, and I've got an 18-year-old now, so I guess I'm a multi-generational family, we're not going to get anywhere. And I can tell you, kids get a bad rap these days, but I'm actually very impressed with them the more I meet young people. I think that's the reason we have for hope in this country. So do you want to come up and say a few words? You more comfortable sitting here? Okay. I'm just going to put this on your tie here. And you should be, I never learned how to do this properly. So. There you go. Have at it.
All right.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your experience and what this means to you to have somebody like Adrian in your life?
Well, it's really nice. It's not as hard. It's a lot easier than having parents, because parents, it's always goodbye, I gotta drive you right now, or whatever. With them, it's let's go whenever you want. It is.
Okay. And I'm just wondering, when you talk to your friends and you tell them a little bit about your grandparents, what do you tell them? What do you tell them about what they mean to you and what they've done for you?
Well, they've done a lot for me. They helped me get a good education, good school. If I was not with them, I don't know where I'll be, but it will not be good.
And finally, I just have to ask you, how did you come up with the idea of making coffee for them and bringing the paper and giving her a great, easy day? What made you think to do that?
Well, she works a lot. She does a lot for me and the family, so we have to pay her back one day, so might as well just do it now.
I'm going to give you my children's email. Thank you. And then we have one more story to close out with. Tu Bui is going to give us his perspective on multi-generational families in a volatile economy. So, Dewey, do you want to come on? Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Donna and Jaya, for inviting me. This is a very impressive group. I've heard about the National Press Club. I never knew that we have the Generation United organization. This morning I woke up very early, get my wife to come because I thought I need to get on the carpool lane on Dulles Access and 66, but that was the wrong choice. Luckily, the GPS took me here, and I got here plenty of time. you can see my brief bio, but quickly, I just turned 77, and we just celebrate our 50th anniversary yesterday. I have 3 children and 6 grandchildren. Right now, I have my son and 2 granddaughters living with us. The reason was because he's divorced. He's lonely, so he rented his house and come back and live with us so that he could take care of us and, mow the lawn and put out the trash. And he does some cooking too. He's better cook than I. His daughters want to go to Marshall High School because all my children graduate from Marshall. And I was assistant principal at Marshall for 8 years before I retired. So it was a good arrangement, and it was great because on and off, my children had come to live with us. First, my son, when he first married, he also moved in until he has his first child for 2 years, and he moved out. And then the second daughter had to move in because husband wanted to go to UVA at Darden School to get an MBA, so she stayed with us for 2 years. And the last daughter also needed a place while the house was being built. They live in Maryland, but they got a job with Cisco System in Herndon. So they thought that living with us while house is being built in the Herndon area would help a lot. Back home, I spent 21 years in the Navy. I spent 10 years at sea. I commanded 7 different ships during the war. So each time I went to sea, my wife and kids had to go to her mom. Of course, her grandmother was also alive, so there are 4 generations. And it really made me feel okay as I was in the war and away. And this is very, very helpful. That one time we had 15 people in the same house. My brother-in-law got out of the re-education camp, in a prison camp in Vietnam. He got out and he came with a wife and 4 boys. So they live with us. I had to build 2 extra bedrooms. So the stress is the long line, in front of the 3 bathrooms. A lot of cooking and serving and washing dishes is terrible, but it is very, very nice, very happy. We always have a lot of fun, and by giving to the children and to the grandchildren, we got a lot of loves, and I think that my son will stay with us, and we expect that we'll die in our own home, because my children would not send us to a nursing home. My wife worked for a volunteer ombudsman, so she visits 3 nursing homes each week and report on the situation of how the residents are not being taken care properly. And she also run a Vietnamese senior hotline. She answers phones to take care of problems happening. Like you mentioned, respite is very, very needed, adult daycare. So both of us, we are taking a course called, chronic disease self-management, so that we could teach in Vietnamese to the senior. My wife is the president of the Northern Virginia Vietnamese Senior Citizen Association. So we work a lot with the senior, and I work a lot with the children too. I'm the president of the church, and also I'm the principal of the Vietnamese language school for the last 9 years. So we need to keep the grandkids be able to communicate with the grandparents and great-grandparents. Thank you. Oh. 1 second. Jaya asked me to say something about saying in Vietnamese. That is, tears flow down on your cheek, not up to your forehead. That means, grandparents, great-grandparents always take care of children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren until they die.
So, thank you. That was a beautiful story. And Larry is going to close this in a minute. I just would close with some observations. One is, I think, it's clear to everybody that we have a demographic shift going on in this country, and there are many, many opportunities for policymakers to address them, and they need to address them. One, to help the housing market is you could, with zoning and different things like that, clearly you need to build extra housing and rooms to have big multi-generational families. The last thing I would just close out on is the more I've heard these stories, the more I realize that there are many different ways to age. There are many ways to be productive and helpful in society and have a rich, older life. And I just want to thank you all for sharing those stories because they've inspired me to do that. So Larry will close.
I want to thank our panelists, our special guests. Joey, I don't know what they're putting on your Cocoa Puffs, but you could sell it to a lot of families. And I can tell you this, if you ever wanted a new video game system, today is the day to ask for it. That's all I'm going to say. Darren, I'm reflecting a bit on the issue of why business should care about these issues. And one of the things that Bubby shared in our breakfast meeting this morning, she did not share today, she had an employer that understood the importance of her responsibilities for the generations above and below her and was very liberal in his attitude about that. I read some numbers somewhere, I don't know if it's an AARP or MetLife, but a responsible study that said caregiving for seniors is costing business $17 billion that they largely don't know about, to say nothing of what the multi-generational kind of issues. You could help us in helping the business world understand why they should care about this and why they should get involved. The second thought I had was that, Bubby is not asking for much from us. She's taken responsibilities I'm guessing most families had, but what she needs from us is basic health care, basic education, and she should not have to spend all of her pension for 127 court appearances to take responsibility for a grandchild that she obviously loves very much. Something's wrong with that. So if we take this family alone, we all would be fortunate beyond measure if we had a Bubby and a double Bubby and a Joey. If we take that family unit and say, how do you design public policy around it, my guess is we would have a more responsible America that would be better stewards of the existing resources available to us. Now, it's up to all of us to take this report and tell that story and stimulate this discussion in every county, state, and the United States Congress in America, because we are stronger together. Thank you all very much for coming, and for those of you who are participating.